Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Strong Collectors Podcast. I'm your host, Dakota, here with my co-host, Jordan. And this is another installment of two guys talking about three guys talking about action figures. So we recently had Comic-Con wrap up, and there were a few folks that got to interview the Hasbro Marvel Legends team. We weren't there. Otherwise, I'm sure they probably would have wanted to talk to us. But
We might have gotten
one
an
of our
email or something. You don't always check the spam folder, so you
that's
gotta
true.
get
That's
better on
true.
that. But
I gotta apologize for that. But one of our specialties is taking some of those interviews and then kind of expanding on some of those thoughts that the interviewer may not be allowed to ask some questions. They may not be able
mhm.
to go into details. But here on the Strong Collectors, we're all about speculation, guessing, and trying to see into the future. So
We have as much time as we want.
exactly. So we're going to be talking about three folks. We're going to talk about Pixel Dan, Sharmus Prime, and MCU Collector. I think we'll start out with Pixel Dan, just because that one, I think it was more of a recap of the panel and not really trying to glean any information from the team. But there was some information that he was able to, you know, share with the team.
Mhm.
First, they started off talking about ROM the Space Knight, which a lot of folks are pretty excited about. And a few of the points there, they said, I think it was Dwight kind of mainly saying that they took a lot of that inspiration from the old comic books instead of the old toys, because similar to Crystar that came out in the Void Wave, and I guess you maybe know this a little bit better than I do, but Crystar for sure started as an action figure, and then they made a comic book to sell the action figures. Is that
Mhm.
how ROM worked, or was ROM
Yeah, I think
comic
ROM was
first?
a toy, and then they made a
Okay.
toy to sell or a comic to sell the toy. Yeah, which I
Okay.
think is why there was
So
that
yeah.
weird licensing thing. But,
Right. Okay. Gotcha. So that's kind of where they decided to take the inspiration from the comics. He's going to be coming, I believe it's with three different accessory type things. For sure, Dwight said the neutralizer and the translator, and then there was another one that I don't know if he couldn't remember it or if maybe it was the translator he couldn't remember. So maybe three accessories there. It'll be up for pre-order next year. So not this year. They were just kind of showing an early digital render of it. But it will be a little bit bigger than your standard Marvel Legend. It's going to be kind of in the basketball player size, so maybe 7-ish inches.
mhm.
Not huge, but larger. Next up, they talked about Dragon Man, and then they were kind of talking about how Dragon Man is an older figure from those like Fantastic Four classics or whatever they called that line back in the day. Um, it's probably one of the like it's not technically a Marvel Legends, but like it still would be lumped in with that. It's probably one of the more expensive things on the aftermarket, other than maybe Fin Fang Foom. I don't know if you can think of anything more expensive, but he's up there. Again, it's not going to be a HasLab. There's not going to be any unlocks, no tiers, nothing like that. But they did say that they'll maybe come back to HasLabs in the future. But
Mhm.
this one is just going to be made to order. They took inspiration for this from the Gamerverse and classic comics. So I was kind of interested to know that they pulled Gamerverse inspiration.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess if you're really trying to set up your Gamerverse displays,
Game reverse
uh,
for Dragon Man.
yeah, I don't know what
I
game it
didn't
would have been a
catch
part
that.
of. Yeah. Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, like I said, I've never played a game where Dragon
Yeah,
Man
well,
was
he
a
wasn't in
character,
that
but
Avengers game, which they were making a lot of those game reverse figures from, and he definitely wasn't in
right.
Spider-Man.
Mm,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe he knows something we don't about an upcoming video game. Actually,
Oh,
a Fantastic Four video game would be kind of cool. Not gonna lie, if they made it
yeah.
like the not Activision, the Spider-Man, the newer Insomniac Spider-Man
Yeah.
games, that'd be cool.
Hmm. True. They did say that the Dragon Man is going to come with a 10-inch bendy wire tail. Um, and I couldn't tell from the pictures from what they had displayed there. I'd have to watch like the videos of them like doing the turns. But
Hmm.
that tail looks very articulate. Like, we usually are ripping on the bendy wire stuff, how it's either straight or almost straight.
Hmm.
But it looked pretty good. So that's why I don't know if this was like a sculpted tail on the prototype or what, but if it's bending as much as it's shown there, it's going to be pretty good. It's the very first all new Punisher they've ever done. So the previous Punishers have been, either on the Bucky cap or just other molds, but this one, he's getting his, his very own Punisher treatment, super articulated, brand new figure. So kind of cool there. And then they did mention, I think you had maybe talked about this during the live stream we just did, but well, I guess this would have been last week. We did live stream, but they will be considering multiple colors for those Sentinels from the arcade game.
Hmm.
So, they're never going to come out and say, like, this is for sure going to come in the future, but they said, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. We could do some alternate color versions of the Sentinels. So, got that to maybe look forward to.
I think we do. But
Yeah. I think now after hearing that, we probably will. And they sold out like right away on Hasbro Pulse. So
yeah.
it definitely shows them that they're desired.
Last thing on Pixel Dan for you Lockjaw fans, we did get confirmed that his tongue Dakota will be able to wag back and forth. So, I was wondering about that, and it's good to know. But on a serious note, I do think it's just cool hearing him explain those little details, and I think also the thought behind the alternate legs rather than the bendy joints, because he's like, it sounded like it was more of an engineering thing, but like
Mm-hmm.
balancing kind of the weight of the head and the legs, and just, which I can see, because sometimes some figures, especially with that kind of a figure, he probably is pretty heavy on the top. So
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. That kind of explained a little more on why they went that route.
Next up, we'll switch over to Shartimus Prime's interview. And I'll say, like, I don't know. It seems like with these next two, like Shartimus Prime and MCU Collector, there was definitely a hard cutoff time crunch
Hmm.
where, whoever's running the interviews was like, hey, you guys have 10 minutes. And if you go
Hmm.
10 minutes over, straight to jail. So they were sticking to their time clock. So it
Yeah.
was very like rapid fire. You could tell they were pretty rushed.
Yeah.
Um, Shartimus kind of mentioned how like there was some questions sidelined for later. So I'm sure
Hmm.
they've done like the screenings of the questions. You had to have them planned out and be like, oh, nope, can't ask that question.
Mm.
Um, so, some of those questions he wanted to ask, couldn't ask. They did have a new Dan on the team. So this was Dan
Yeah.
from sculpting.
Hmm.
So we've got Dan from marketing and Dan from sculpting.
Double Dan, Dan on Dan.
One of the first things that they brought up was head and neck articulation. And I was like, "Oh, the neck, the most overlooked
Yeah.
detail from Marvel Legends." But it wasn't quite that. It was more of the like articulation of the head and
Right.
neck. So talked about
But even so, you were
the,
on the right track with that tombstone head neck peg thing.
yeah,
They're thinking
that's
about
true. I
necks
think,
over there.
right. So yeah, maybe when they send us an email and get us on, we'll ask about my questions with the neck.
Mhm.
Um, but Shardimus was more in the like talking about the like the disc and hinge or the barbells or the different
Mhm.
articulation, like even lower in the neck to get more
Right.
range.
Mhm.
Um, and I think Dwight was kind of mentioning that, you can't always do the same thing for every character because
Mhm.
depending on whether there's different armor or different things, it just either wouldn't look right or doesn't work with the character.
Mhm.
Um, but he was saying that there was possibility for like all new neck articulation. Um, so I don't really know exactly what that would entail, other than like, maybe to go along with my thoughts and speculations on neck articulation. If you just added, because the tombstone neck is like
Right. You
sculpted
can't
from the head to the
then, yeah,
bottom. Yeah. But if you added like that upper neck
swivel.
articulation, then I think you could,
Then you could
be onto something a little bit
best of
better.
both worlds there, but
Right. And
mhm.
that would be maybe what I would suggest to them, but it's also, it's such a small thing that who cares other than me.
I don't know, though. I could see them nerding out. Like, it does seem like, at least Dwight pretty nerds out, obviously, on, like, the engineering stuff. So,
Hmm.
um, you never know, Dakota.
That's true. Um, then they talked. Shartimus was asking about the shoulders sitting lower on some characters, like the Astonishing
Mhm.
Wolverine, which I haven't noticed. So I don't know. I don't know if you've noticed that on any of your figures. Um,
Not particularly. I mean,
right.
I haven't had that Wolverine, though, so I'm not sure. Maybe there's other ones where he looks like that.
Yeah. Um, but they were, I think he was also kind of talking about the different butterfly joint mods and
Mhm.
how, you could probably look this up on YouTube as well, but heat up your, Vulcan or whatever character has butterfly joints that maybe doesn't have full range, pop them out, and then you can like snip some of the peg off, and that'll give
Mm-hmm.
you more range. Dwight was saying that when you do that at like their production scale, it kind of messes with the integrity of
Mm-hmm.
the character or the figure, and then you might see more breakages, or maybe that shoulder doesn't stay in there as well. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
why they go with the extra. Which I've never done any of those mods on my butterfly joints. I've been tempted. I've got a Vulcan popped apart, but that was more
Mm-hmm.
for a custom. Um, but you've probably never done those, have you, Jordan?
I have not, Dakota.
Yeah, you're a simple man.
I
Um,
I like my toys fully assembled.
right. Ryan was saying that he felt represented with the low shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind
Yeah.
of, I thought that was a very fun response to a
Yeah.
question
Yeah, I
or a
thought it was
statement, I
cool
guess.
too, the level of insight with the engineering, like, because I'm
Hmm.
sure there's no part that's just like we're randomly going to slap this together. Like, even if you're saying this toy sucks or it doesn't move the way I want it to, there's still a lot of detail and planning that goes into them. So I thought that was
Right.
cool hearing them be like, well, you need certain connections if they're thicker based on the figure and like the structure of it. So I think
Yeah.
that's a good answer to when it's just like, well, this isn't the way I want it to be. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we're doing our best to make them as close as we can, but
Hmm.
they have to stay together too.
Right. Yeah. And I don't even know if this one was actually posed as a question. I think it was just more of like Sharmus was just saying, "Hey, here's a statement that
Hmm.
he's either heard from the community or heard or like one of his own opinions that he was like sharing." And then like Dwight was able to be like, "Oh, like I can respond to that and like give you the answers for your statement that So I thought that was kind of cool to the team to not only just answer the questions they were asked, but also just
Hmm.
take a statement and respond. So um, that was cool. Shardmus was also saying, or a little more requesting, that they do an angry and a neutral head sculpt with every figure. I think that definitely makes sense, like in
Hmm.
my perfect world. But at the same time, how full of a fodder bin do I need of all these extra heads? It's not really the most important thing to me. But I understand when you've got like a Wolverine or something and you got like only a neutral face, you're kind of like, oh, kind of want Wolverine, slicing and
Hmm.
dicing some army builders.
Right.
And I don't want him to just like do it straight faced. So,
Yeah. I think with
um,
certain figures for sure. I don't think I'd say I need every figure to have two
right.
heads or two heads to swap in
Hmm.
and out, but I get it.
Yeah. I could definitely see it being more often just because, yeah, like you said, like, do I need if a Tony Stark figure comes as Tony Stark, or like, if I get an MJ figure, do I need MJ to be angry? Most likely I don't. So, I don't know.
Hmm.
It makes sense to be a little bit more character specific. Then Shardamus brought up what he thought was scaling issues, or that he had heard about the Danny Ketch. But then Dwight was saying that Dwight said false. Just kind of, I didn't realize Dwight and Dwight. Anyway, um,
Oh, hey,
he was
I
saying
like
that
that.
Johnny Blaze was actually too big. So when you're
Hmm.
comparing your old Johnny Blaze to your new Danny Ketch, in Dwight's mind, that Johnny Blaze was built too big. So they're
Hmm.
trying to kind of fix the scaling now by making the Danny Ketch figure a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have a Johnny Blaze anymore, so I don't have anything to compare that to.
Hmm.
But hopefully that means if Dwight thinks the old Johnny Blaze is too big, he wants to put out a new figure that's more accurate in his mind. So more Ghost Riders to come,
And you
probably,
get Kashala.
and then I'll get Kashala someday.
We've got to exhaust all the other Ghost Riders first, though, Dakota. I'm sorry.
I mean, there's not that many more Ghost Riders, right? I feel like there's like
You
two
need
other Ghost
Carter
Riders. I mean, we're not going to
Slade.
get
You
a.
need
Yeah, I'd take that.
Vengeance.
Oh, I would take a Vengeance too, though.
I
So
know you would.
I'm not going to be. Um,
Take your
what
time.
is it? 10 million BC might be a little
Yeah,
bit
there
of
you
a
go.
stretch.
We
I
need a
don't think
new
we're going to
Nick
get a Robbie
Cage.
Reyes. That would have been interesting to put in the, spoiler alert. That would have been cool to put in the Deadpool movie. But
I would have loved that.
um,
You didn't even
that
need
would
to
have
get
been
Nick
good.
Cage. You could have just CG'd Ghost Rider in there.
True.
But that's
Um,
another discussion.
yeah. Then they were talking about the Odin figure and how they take
Hmm.
inspiration from um, not only comics but also statues. And Sharmus was talking about how excited he is about the Odin figure. So I'm interested to see his review when that figure comes out, because he's
Mm,
already gotten his hands on it, so he knows it's a great figure. But
mhm.
he always kind of does that, like at the end of his videos, where it's like, oh, and for the price point of around, he's gonna have to say $60. What does he think of it? Because for me, that
Mm,
plays a big factor into like how
yeah,
much you like it. I mean, maybe it's going to be an incredible figure,
but
best
if
all time,
you pay a ton for it,
right?
yeah.
It better be the best of all time. So I'm interested to see that when compared on the price scale.
Mhm,
Then we'll move over into MCU Collector. Obviously, we're going to be kind of shifting more, a little bit more focused onto the MCU figures here.
mhm,
He was asking when they were going to get a Regent figure.
mhm.
So you know a little
Yeah,
bit more about this character than I do,
I
Jordan.
I do. I was a little surprised to get a Regent reference because I haven't thought of that guy in quite a while. To my knowledge, Dakota, I first encountered him in when they were doing the Spider-Man Renew Your Vows comic.
Hmm.
So I think it was like the first mini series of it where it was exploring that like alternate world where Peter Parker's married and he's got a kid and he had
Hmm.
retired for a time. A bunch of the heroes disappeared. So Regent was kind of this like he was, if I remember right, he was kind of like capturing the superheroes and like absorbing their powers and stuff. So
Mm.
kind of a bigger, bulkier dude. I don't know if he did much outside of that series, so that's why I was like, Regent, what the heck? But I did get that reference. So,
Okay.
yeah, it sounded like he said, what would we do? What would his scale be? Would he be deluxe? Would he be bigger? Whatever. Um, so, I mean, I guess they've at
I mean, would
least.
he? I haven't. I've. It's been a little bit since I've read that storyline, but
Mhm.
would having him, in my mind, like doing a repaint of that new deluxe Ronin figure, would that be the right size, or would that be too small?
I would say too small from my memory of him.
Okay.
I think he'd be,
Okay.
yeah, a bit bulkier than that, I think, or at least
Okay.
he should be. But
Okay.
again, I don't know how many fans out there are like we want Regent, but
Right.
I mean, they've done more obscure characters, so who knows?
True. I mean, it is a Spider-Man character, so that alone maybe would help. And I think maybe if it was a little bit more riding the coattails of that Renew Your Vows storyline, maybe that would help.
Right.
But also, maybe there's just
Mhm.
some story I don't know about it that is
Yeah.
more important with Regent.
Mhm.
So let us know out there, what other stories do we need to read other than Renew Your Vows to get a better understanding of Regent? They talked about the Iron Patriot coming out with white paint instead of silver. Apparently, that was Dwight's master plan all along, which I don't know. I haven't seen enough pictures of it to be like, oh no, this is terrible or this is great. Mine, I think, should actually be here this week, probably,
Mhm.
maybe next week, but I'll be getting
Mhm.
that in hand soon. So by the time you're watching this, maybe I'll have stronger opinions about it. Um, but I will say I don't love when Marvel Legends puts out promo shots of figures and then the figure you get in hand is different.
Mhm.
Um, that happens sometimes with Mythic Legions too, where like the lighting of a certain character will change its color. I don't love when that happens. I want to know
Mhm.
what I'm going to have in my hand when I purchase it. So again, like I said, I don't think this one's really going to make me return my 3-pack, but
Mhm.
a little more accurate promo shots would be nice. Then they were talking about the Target street dates. This was, I think, mainly referencing the Retro Carnage. Some folks have been able to find it, some folks have been able to get it, but then a lot of people are getting street dated when they try to check out. So it's like if you haven't had that happen to you before, you would find Target, or at Target, you would find your Retro Carnage on the store shelves, take it up to the register, check out, and then you'd get like an alert
Mhm.
saying like you can't actually buy this until, I can't remember when it is, whatever the street date is. I
Mhm.
think it's in October maybe. Um, and then sometimes or most times the employee will like take it from you and take it to like customer service and like you can't buy it. Sometimes customer service doesn't, or like the employee doesn't care and they're just like, ah, whatever, void it, take it, doesn't matter. That can, I think, frustrate some people, because then when you are able to buy it, you're one of those few that, A, you got it super early, and B, some people are finding it but not able to buy it, but then trying to sell it on
Mhm.
the secondary market. And it's like, okay, now this $25 figure is now selling for, I haven't looked at what he's going for, but I would assume maybe in the $50 plus range,
Mhm.
just because it's so brand new. But Ryan was talking about how it's really challenging to get, it's like such a large scale store like Target where there's so many locations. You can't, tell every employee. Then, most of those employees, like, what do they care? This is an action figure. You're just some nerd trying to buy a toy.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care most of the time, sometimes, whatever. So trying to get all of them on the same page is pretty challenging. But they try to do those street dates so that it's a little bit more fair for collectors so that
Mm-hmm.
everybody gets it on the same time. It works sometimes, but it's not a perfect system.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have any care about that, Jordan, but I personally am kind of like, it's street dated. I'm going to mostly try to find my stuff online anyway. It's a
Mm-hmm.
bummer, but I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. Same boat.
Talked about doing more MCU Army Builders,
Mm-hmm.
because we just got the, what are these
Outriders.
called? Outriders.
Mm-hmm.
They've done the Tracksuit Mafia. They've done a
Mm-hmm.
couple Wakanda figures. But he was kind of like, hey, can we get some more of these? Dwight was saying that he wants to do some zombie Asgardians. Like, is that
Hela's,
from the
yeah,
What If?
Hela's. No, I thought he was thinking Hela's army and Ragnarok.
Mm.
Remember, she like
Oh,
summons
okay.
the skeleton Viking
Gotcha.
Norse
Yeah.
guys. So
That,
I hadn't
that'd
thought
be
of
kind of cool.
that
I mean, that
as an
sounds,
army builder, but I could see that being applicable in scenarios. You maybe even need to get
I mean,
those.
that's kind of, would that be up your alley, Jordan? I know you
I
like
think
your
it might be,
skeletons.
depending on how
Okay.
they pull it off. But I think that would be
Hmm.
kind of fun. I know the
Okay.
other one they mentioned, at least MCU Collector was talking about the Dark Elves.
Yeah.
I don't know how much pull that would have, but I mean, if they're looking to keep doing MCU Army Builders, that one seems pretty logical outside of the Shatari from Avengers. But I guess that
Yeah.
could be a whole separate MCU Army Builder speculation, perhaps. I don't know if there's interest in that.
True. They were also talking about, or MCU Collector was asking if there was going to be any more Build-A-Figure waves coming out this
Mm-hmm.
year, because I think so far this year has been pretty light on the Build-A-Figure waves. But Dwight was saying that they're about to drop one of the best Build-A-Figures they've done in years. It's like one of his most favorite things he's worked on in the last like 4 to 5 years. So maybe this
It's a
deserves
bold
its own
statement.
speculation issue as well,
Yeah,
because
I think we
what
should
could
hold
that
off on
be?
that, but that did intrigue me. So
Yeah.
I'd like to dream that up.
Yeah. Because I mean, I'm trying to think of something that would like excite me
Hmm.
more than the things in the past 5 years. So
Or what would
I don't know.
excite Dwight?
True.
We got to
He's a
think
big
about
fan of
that.
the Reavers. I don't think it would be Reavers related. It's got to be maybe a new Holocaust, like a new Nemesis Build-A-Figure. Because I know he like commissioned a Dio thing for his AOA display.
Okay.
So maybe that. I don't know. I'm very excited to see.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll see that at PulseCon. They talked a little bit more about Dragon Man. He was asking if there was going to be more like him, or if they were going to switch back to HasLabs, and Ryan was just kind of saying they're testing it out right now. But I don't know. For me, I'm a little bit more excited about this, and I think most people are going to be more excited about this idea of it's just like an open pre-order
Mm-hmm.
versus crowdfund. I think
Yeah.
that makes a lot more sense, especially Hasbro being a ginormous corporation.
Mm-hmm.
When they start doing crowdfunds, it just seems a little off to most collectors.
Yeah.
Where, if
Yeah.
brand new companies are doing Kickstarters, we don't care because, they're trying to get off the ground.
Yeah. Well, and I think it would fix that problem that we've talked about of like how many more giant size figures do we need? Like that would kind of let you.
Exactly.
That might be Dakota where you get your supersized Sentinel that's not quite giant, but it's a little bit bigger. So I think
Yes.
there are a lot more figures I could see fitting into that model than the
Yes.
$200, $300, $400 HasLab personally. So I am also excited for
100%.
that.
Yeah. And that's
We could
another,
also
like,
speculate on that.
I was going to say, I want to do a deep dive into this whole Dragon Man versus HasLab idea, which, you stay tuned because next week I'm sure we're going to do it. But I'm super excited about that kind of conversation because I've been trying to kill the idea of HasLabs for a long time.
The
So
folks are watching the wheels turn right now. This is how the magic happens. So if you watch this far, you're getting a treat.
yeah. MCU Collector was asking about the teases. We kind of are assuming that that's going to be Spider-Man Unlimited and Spider-Boy. they didn't, say that in the interview or anything, but I think Ryan was saying that those will be shown next year, because it kind of sounded like they don't have like the whole wave or whatever they're going to be offered in wasn't completed yet. So down the road for that, Giant Man will be coming out in October. And then the final question he asked was, what single figure would you want to go back
Mm-hmm.
and redo? Which I thought was a pretty interesting question. And they kind of kept this within the realm of MCU figures, being that it's MCU Collector asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
Dwight said he wanted to do a Hela again, which is really surprising to me because I think that figure is fantastic. He was saying it's a
Mm-hmm.
little too big for me. That's why I think it's cool. But he wanted to do a little bit scaled down, more
Mm-hmm.
blades, maybe more versions of the crown. And
Mm-hmm.
then he was saying a giant wolf and then a human sized Surtur, and it would all be available for $50. So
Right.
excited to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan was saying he wanted a redo of Avengers 1 Loki, which technically wasn't a Marvel Legends. I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember what that was a part of, but it was something else. You've had that versus.
Yeah,
Did you ever end up selling that?
I did. I never opened it, but
Okay.
you know, I could definitely
Um,
see that improving from an update for sure.
yeah. Marketing Dan said that he wants time travel suits from the last
Mm.
Avengers movie
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know if they've done, I think they've done some of those, but not the whole team. And then New Dan was saying that he wanted to do like maybe a Happy Hogan, Agent Coulson suited body, like something in between that, which I think there'd be enough people that would want a new Agent Coulson, either comic or MC, which you could just do two different head sculpts for that and then
Pretty
bing, bang,
similar
boom.
looking, I think.
Right. Now getting outside of two guys talking about three guys, I wanted to mention, I guess it's still three guys because it's the Hasbro team, but they did a card opening segment as one of their like extra, kind of not really live stream, I don't think, but
Mm-hmm.
since Death's Head came on the Marvel Universe 2 trading cards, they were doing some like live openings there, which is kind of funny because like the cards are 33 years old, I think Ryan was saying, which is older than Dan. It's older than us. Kind of cool. Kind of, I don't know, makes me feel young because that doesn't happen as much anymore. But as they were opening it, they came across a Baron Mordo card, which they kind of mentioned that they still need to do that because I think that's, I don't know if it's number one on my list of villains that I want, but it's probably number one on my list of villains that I need for my
Oh,
collection.
okay.
So, kind of an interesting wants versus needs. Maybe we do that list, Jordan.
Wants
Top five
versus
characters we
needs.
need. Not really want them, but we need them.
We need them. All right. I like it.
They also they pulled a Ultimate Nullifier card. They had mentioned maybe doing a role play item of that. And maybe with Galactus coming to the MCU, maybe that makes a little bit more sense to,
Mm-hmm.
make a Ultimate Nullifier
Maybe we'll see it
1-to-1
on the
scale
screen.
type thing. They pulled an Iceman card. Dwight was saying that a pinless Iceman is long overdue. Ryan was saying that it should come with the Ice Slide and make it a deluxe. I'm all for that. I would love it. I've said before, I don't think they've done their perfect Iceman yet. The retro's okay. That one's probably the best. The Amazing Friends 3-pack, not so great. Juggernaut, not my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely could use a new Jim Lee looking Iceman. They also pulled a Absorbing Man, and Dwight was saying that he wanted to redo that on the orange jumpsuit. So we had kind of speculated that on one of our Secret Wars speculation episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, I don't know. Another card they pulled was Saracen or something like that. Never heard of this character before, but apparently it's a Punisher villain. Another one that they pulled was Deathwatch, which is a Ghost Rider villain. Another one I've never heard of, but Deathwatch looks a little bit cooler in my opinion. And I could see them doing that. That kind of looks like you could just do some reuse from like a Dormammu or something like that. So there you have it, folks. That is our two guys talking about three guys, a little extra deep dive into the conversations. Let us know your thoughts on these interviews. Which of these figures are you most excited about? Which of those card polls would you want to see put into Marvel Legends first? Make sure you're liking, sharing, and subscribing. And until next time, stay strong.